Hello, this is Mesos Oram, and welcome to SFML tutorials. Today, we'll be constructing a rocks class for our SpaceRocks game. First, we're going to make our .h file. Name it rocks. Then we're going to make our C++ file. Also name it rocks. We're going to say sharp include rocks.h. Then we're going to go over to the rocks.h file. We need to sharp include randomize.h, sharp include colors.h, and sharp include entity.h. We will make our class as usual. We will say class rocks, as well as our usual private and public. We'll make our constructor and deconstructor rocks, as well as rocks. Up here, we need to make a vector of entities. We will say standard vector entity star and rocks. We need to call our randomize and colors class, so we will say randomize star randomize, as well as colors star colors. To limit how many rocks are on the screen, we will need to specify our max rocks, so we will say unsigned int max rocks. For spawning our rocks, we will need a timer, so we will say float rock timer and float rock timer max. Our rocks will need a base velocity, so we will also say float base velocity. On the fly, we will need to know our rock's texture size, so we will specify that as a vector2u texture size. Then we can initialize our variables. We'll make those functions. Void init variables. We'll also initialize our randomize and colors class, so void init randomize, as well as void init colors. At some point, we will want to spawn a rock, so we will say void spawn rock, and inside of here, we will say sf vector2f position, as well as sf vector2f rock size, and sf vector2f window size. At the end of its lifespan, we'll want to delete our rock, so we will say void delete rock, and we will specify the index of which we are deleting. Unsigned int index. Scrolling down a bit, going down here, we will also need to update our rocks, so we will say void update, and inside of here we will take in float delta time, as well as sf vector2f window size. And lastly, we will need to render, so we will say void render. And inside of here, we say sf render window and window. We will define those really quickly. And we will clean this up. Down in our constructor, we are going to initialize our variables. We will initialize our randomize, and we will initialize our colors. We're going to scroll up, go up here. We're going to set our max rocks at 15, so max rocks equals 15. This will limit the amount of rocks that spawn on screen. We will set our max timer for our rocks, rock timer max, to equal 2.5f, and set our rock timer to our rock timer max. We're going to set our base velocity to 60, so base velocity equals 60.0f, and we're going to set our texture size to 27 by 27. In init randomize, we just need to say randomize equals new randomize, and in init colors we just need to say colors equals new colors. Now we can scroll down, give us a lot of room. In our spawn rock function, we will say rocks dot pushback and say new entity. Inside of here, we will say sprites slash meteoroid dot png as well as texture size. We need to get the index of this entity, so we will say unsigned int index equals rocks dot size -1. We need to set the position of our rock, so we will say rocks dot add index dot set position as position. So that we can color the rocks, we will say first randomize dot randomize float between 0.0f and 360.0f. Now we will declare hue, saturation, and value variables. So we will say float h equals randomize dot randomf. We're going to copy this, and then we'll say like that, S and V, and divide both of these by 360.0f. Now we can set the colors, so we will say rocks dot add index dot set color as colors dot HSV to RGB as HSV. Now we can copy this, go down here, paste it, then we can put it between -1 and 1. We can copy this right here, go down here. We'll declare our x and y variables. We'll say float x equals randomize.randomf and float y equals the same thing. Now we will declare a velocity variable, SF_Vector2F_Vel equals x and y. Then we will multiply that by our base velocity. Now we can set the rocks velocity, rocks dot add index dot set velocity as vel. We can also set our rocks angular velocity and say rocks dot add index dot set angular velocity as our randomf. We're going to make sure our rocks loop, so we will say rocks dot add index dot has looping is true, and up here we're going to say rocks dot add index dot set entity size as rock size. Now we're going to set the origin. I'm just going to copy this, say rocks at index dot set origin as rocks at index dot get entity size, and divide that by 2.0f. Now we're going to scroll down to delete rock. Here we will say delete rocks dot at index, and then we will say rocks dot erase at rocks dot begin plus index. Down in our deconstructor, we will first say delete randomize as well as delete colors. Then we will delete all remaining rocks for unsigned int I equals 0, I is less than rocks dot size, and plus I. Then we will just delete rock at I. Scrolling down to give us a lot of room, we will first say rock timer minus equals delta time. We will make an if statement. We will say if rocks timer is less than or equal to 0.0f, as well as our rocks dot size is less than our max rocks. Then first we will declare a variable SF_Vector2F position. Next we will make a randomized float. We will say randomize dot randomize float between 0.0f and window size dot x. Then we will set our x position to position dot x equals randomize dot randomf And our y position to position dot y equals negative 2.0f multiplied by our float of our texture size dot y. We need a random int between 0 and 1, randomize dot randomize int between 0 and 1. Next, in an if statement, we will say if randomize dot randomi. Then inside of there, we'll copy this first and say that between 0 and the window size dot y. Then we will copy this, paste it down here, and instead of the y, it will be x for that. And the same with our x position being reversed into a y. After this, we will spawn our rock, spawn rock, as position, SF, vector 2f, texture size, and window size. Finally, in this if statement, we will say rock timer equals rock timer max. Finally, in update, we will say for unsigned int I equals 0, I is less than rocks dot size, then plus plus I. Scrolling down, and in here we will just say rocks dot add I dot update entity with delta time and window size. In this for loop later on, we're going to add more things, but not in this video. So for now, we're just going to go into render, and we can just copy this and paste it here because it's going to be exactly the same. Then we will say window dot draw and star rocks dot add I. Going back to the SpaceRocks.h file, we will say sharp include rocks.h, and down here we will say rocks and rocks, and we will say rocks.update. Inside of here, just enter delta time and our window size, and below ship we will say rocks.render and input our window. And finally, we will enter the debug menu. As we can see, there's a meteor going across the screen. Now, we can't interact with it in any way, but in the next coming videos, we will. Thank you for joining me today. If you did, then please like, comment, and subscribe, and have a great day.